Okay, I'm back in F1 Race Stars. I'm here to talk about the Spanish Grand Prix that's just happened. Historic race, the oldest ever Dutch driver to win a Grand Prix, Max Verstappen. I want to sort of cover a lot of things. I'm really only going to focus on the top six cars because, frankly, it's one of those weird, exciting races where you don't know what happens behind because it's worth watching the front. Sometimes you got to look for the battle for 10th or whatever to find your excitement, and that wasn't the case this week. It was the podium positions were the interesting parts of the Grand Prix, which is probably, I think, traditionally the way people are most comfortable watching races, so it's good in that sense. So I guess we start at the start, and Lewis Hamilton was on pole. His engine worked completely in qualifying. Well done. And he nailed his lap. There was a point where he was slow, and after the first run he was slow, Max Verstappen, and everyone was like, what's going on? But no, he nailed second one, Rosberg was second, and Ricciardo third, which, I was slightly surprised by in the first place. I didn't realise quite how fast the Red Bull was, / how slow the Ferrari was. I don't know what's going on there. Red Bull are due, it's only a couple of races now, they're due a big update to their engine. I was going to say they're going to win races this year, they've just won a race, they're going to win more. Might be crazy saying this, there's a very good chance that both Ricciardo and Verstappen could play some role in the title challenge this year. Ricciardo and Hamilton on the same number of points, and that car is quick, and it's going to get quicker. Outside of Monza, there's not really, there's not really that many places they can't win. And Red Bull are a very, very good team at winning races. So, I've got a sneaking suspicion that they might really, really push hard. But then off the start, Hamilton, for the third time this season, when he's got a bad grip position. No, not a bad grip position. Sorry, when he's on pole, the two not including the times when he had bad grip positions. He's fluffed the start is too strong a term, wouldn't it? Because I fluffed the start there. I pushed the wrong button. But he was not. He didn't get it that badly wrong. It's just Rosberg got a much better start, and he sort of hung one on outside the outside. That's not English, is it? He hung it out to dry on the outside, and Hamilton didn't cut him off, which maybe he should have done. I think he should have at least seen it coming. You would normally, if Hamilton does have history with sort of going left off the start to try, or right, depending on which side is preferable, to try and cut off the guy in second rather than just get the fastest start. I think maybe he was so focused this week on not messing up the start that he didn't think to cover off the overtake. So he got done for it. And then there was the incident. Now, I'll give you my very, very initial take, and I'll sort of move into a slightly more analytical position and where I think blame lies. The very, very first thing I thought was, Hamilton's panicked here. He was on pole, and he's like, I need to win this race. I need to stop Nico winning 8 races in a row. So, once he got past from the start, he's like, I've got to attack. I've got to get in front, because he just said, because he knew he had to win. He had to beat Nico. This weekend was not good for him because it's another race this year where he's not outscoring him. That's what he needs to be doing, is outscoring him every week from now on, basically. But I think there was a little bit of, I know it's a 66 lap race, but I have to be leading on lap 2 to win the race, and that's not the mature attitude you expect to come from a triple world champion, in my opinion. Obviously some will say that wasn't what was going on, but that was my initial thinking of, he went overly aggressive on turn 4 of a Grand Prix. And as much as you can say, oh, he should have been given room, or you're not a racing driver, you don't try and go for the pass, whatever. It's like he put himself in a very, very compromising position, with so much time left that he didn't have to. If you think you're faster than your teammate, which I'm sure Lewis Hamilton believes he's the quicker driver in a fair fight, you can find a better place to pass than that. You can find a cleaner place to pass. You don't have to shove it up on the inside on a straight on the first lap of the race. You'll find it eventually. So I thought it was a stupid thing to do, and it wasn't his fault they crashed, because he went off the track. He wasn't in control of the car anymore. But I felt as if it was his fault that he went off the track in the first place. I went the wrong way there. Sorry. And then upon watching the replays and listening to all the moaners on TV and on social media and that, the big argument seemed to be, did Rosberg deliberately cut him off? And the answer is obviously yes. Rosberg put his car in a position where Hamilton wanted to put his, so that he wouldn't pass him. But this is called defending. You are allowed to defend your position on a racetrack. If you're in front, you're allowed to make one move, which he did. That was his one move, to cover off the overtake. If he then moved again, he could, if he'd moved left first and then he cut right and hit Hamilton, that would be 100% his fault. But then the argument is, but he was Hamilton got a wheel in front. This is true. Hamilton did at some point in the manoeuvre, just before leaving the track. Lewis Hamilton was just level with the rear tyre of Rosberg's car, which that is in front. It's all well and good. But Rosberg didn't make the move then. He was already moving that way. So he's not allowed. He's allowed to hold his line. That's one of the things I think people have missed. Yes, he moved off the racing line. He's entitled to do that. Yes, that led to Hamilton leaving the track. Yes, but he moved before Hamilton got level with him. You're perfectly entitled to do that, and that's what the FIA basically said. Is he wasn't in front of him when he moved, which that's how I see it. I would also always, in every single scenario when there is a crash, the guy behind, unless there is something obviously like he's torpedoed from I don't even know how. Basically, in almost every scenario, the guy behind is responsible because the guy behind has a full view of the situation and has this magic pedal underneath his left foot that when he pushes it, the car slows down. That's all. All Hamilton had to do as soon as he saw Rosberg moving across was push that left pedal, and he would be magically not crashing into him. And yes, that might cost him time, and yes, he would have to potentially face attacks from behind. But that's the risk you take when you make an attack. Everyone knows this. This is what they're going into. So I just don't buy that he had no other choice. And once you're going on the grass, that's a massive risk, and anything could happen. So, I don't think we're talking punished. Obviously, nobody's been punished, but I don't think necessarily Lewis Hamilton should be punished for what he did. I just think to try and apportion blame to to Rosberg in this situation is nonsensical. It's not what. It doesn't seem to be in touch with what actually happened. And as much as you can say, he's vindictive, he's trying to, he's shown strength. I think that's what we want. We don't want to see people just giving up their positions. The exact thing we want to see in racing is the guys fighting. And fighting is a two-way street. If all overtakes involve the other guy having to get out of the way, that was the other thing that really frustrated me, is people saying, but Hamilton had the momentum. It's like, no one has ever brought up the phrase, he had the momentum in an overtaking scenario prior to yesterday. I've never heard anyone go, "Oh, you should let him pass," because the whole point is you're ahead. You stay in front as much as you can, as long as you do that only making one move. If you make a second move, then you're at fault. But that's he was only ever defending, and you're entitled to do that, and I'm perfectly fine with what he did. Anyway, I think that's pretty much done that to death. So I just want to talk about the actual results now. I am mixed on Verstappen. It was clearly, now that it's happened, it's clear that he probably was the better driver than Kvyat all along, and it's perfectly fair. Like, almost you should say, why wasn't he in the seat 4 races ago? Why did it have to come to this to do it? Because the way it's been done is very unceremoniously, and I think they've been vindicated in it. Now, Kvyat will say, "Oh yeah, I could have finished ahead of him if I'd been given the same scenario," because it was a very favourable scenario for Red Bull. But Verstappen absolutely nailed the weekend. he was probably not faster than Ricciardo throughout. Ricciardo led the race for most of the time until his strategy went, and he was faster in qualifying. But Verstappen was much closer than Kvyat normally was, and that to me suggests, Verstappen's only 18, and Ricciardo's probably, to my mind, the best driver on the grid. You can debate the minutiae of it, but he's in the top 3 or 4, and there's not much to choose between them. So, it seems kind of obvious in hindsight that Verstappen deserves to be in that seat. I find he's an 18-year-old, so there are certain aspects of his personality that aren't that appealing, because teenagers are, numpties. But you can't argue with his pace. Behind him, Raikkonen, Kimi. I think it's one of those sort of weekends where I don't think he was pushing for the win in the end. Which I think is unfortunate, because I know what he's doing. His plan in the entire scheme of things is to still have a job next year. I think he wants to have it, but I think that he's driving deliberately in a way that will keep his job, which is sort of consistent, but not necessarily taking the risks that I think Vettel would in that scenario, which is, I don't think Kimi Raikkonen was concerned about whether he won the race or not. I think a podium for him is exactly the sort of thing he wants. And he was far more concerned about being the guy that goes for an overtake and doesn't make it than he was being the guy that wins. Which, I think if you're in that world, and he's now second in the championship, so maybe it works. Taking 18 points is not that far off 25 when supposedly your rivals are scoring 0. I just would have liked to have seen a dive down the inside. You see what Ricciardo did with Vettel, where he went for it. He didn't get it, but he had a go, and he certainly made a fight of it. He kept the guy in front of him on his toes. I just think that Raikkonen could have... It may have only been superficial in the end, but he could have made a more visible effort to chase down Verstappen. But, he's second in the grid, second in the championship. It can't be all that bad. As for third place man Vettel, it's again, I think this is a bad weekend for him. He was 6th on the grid in qualifying. That's unacceptable for him. He should be 3rd, if not 2nd, if not 3rd. He doesn't do losing, and 6th is definitely losing. So in that case, I think he had a bad weekend. 3rd place, he's been 3rd a lot in the last year or two, but it's just not. It's different when he's supposed to be the guy, and this was the case last year. If Mercedes don't finish, he wins. I'm fairly sure. As much as he wants to be beaten on merit, I'm very sure he had in his mind, my goal for this year is every single race that that basically he doesn't finish behind anyone that isn't Mercedes, and that's not what he's So if the Red Bulls or Kimi finish ahead of him, he's had a bad race. I think that's got to be the standard he's setting himself, because that's the standard that will get him a fifth championship eventually. So he didn't get that. Kimi was way ahead of him eventually. I think that was down to strategy, because I think Ferrari have, for the second time this year, have thrown away a race win, which is that Vettel was, for several points in that race, the fastest driver, but they kept chasing this extra tyre strategy like they did in Australia, where they thought, if we take the fastest strategy but give up track position, we'll somehow catch up eventually. And you just don't need to do it. Like, it rarely works. And when it works, you look a genius, but just try and stay in front and cover everyone else. That's, I would have, if or would have, even if we can speak English, if I had been on that pit wall, I would have said, we're faster in the race than these two Red Bulls. We are going to chase them, and we're going to pass them, and we're going to do exactly the same strategy as whichever one of them is winning. And when I say that, if they do something which you obviously think doesn't work, which I think is what Ricciardo did, then obviously don't do that. But just don't try and go on some contra strategy in the hope that you'll make up time when you don't have time you need to make up. It's why they lost in Australia. It's why he was third today, or yesterday, depending on when I'm actually talking. I think it's Monday. And Ricciardo is the same, and I don't necessarily buy the conspiracies that Red Bull wanted Verstappen to win. Obviously they wanted to win, but I think they wouldn't put Ricciardo in fourth if that was the case. I think they would have rather a 1-2 than a 1-4. Regardless of which way around the drivers are. But I think they put him on a weird strategy, because I think you get in this situation. It happens a lot in Formula One, where the teams will look at the optimal strategy, and they'll say, "Oh, we can't tell if it's a 3 or a 4 stop," and then the winner does a 2 stop, because whatever time you might gain by running on the faster tyres for however many laps it is that you think that they want to do, you will be slower because you'll get caught behind people. There's a safety car which meant that there were fewer laps to run on the tyres that they were using. Everything is sort of combines to create a situation where you just want to use the fewest number of tyres as possible. I know that Pirelli have got these supposedly the tyre formula these days is one where they degrade fast, and you've got to be careful, but it never pays off. I say never, it almost never pays off to be the ones taking the extra stop. You've got to be really on your toes and probably get some sort of luck in the way for that to work. And that's why Verstappen and Raikkonen beat Vettel and Kvyat, because Vettel and Ricciardo even, because they got track position and they kept it. And it's as simple as that. As much as strategy can get interesting, the main thing you need to do at all times is get to the front and stay there. As for the rest of the grid, I really couldn't tell you what was going on below them. I know Bottas was 5th, but a long way back. I believe Sainz had a very, very good race in 6th. But the joy of having an exciting and interesting race where there was lots going on and lots to talk about, we didn't really get to see who was fighting for 7th or anything. It was all the television was on the front, which is, I think, the way people want it to be, because that means people that have paid the most money to be there get the most airtime, which is a very sort of cynical way of looking at it, but I think, you know, we want to see the winners, we don't want to see people in second, third, fourth place, whatever you want. Why? Well, we do want to see second, third, fourth, we don't want to see further back than that. So anyway, I think that pretty much covers what I'm going to talk about today. I'll probably try and do another one of these for Monaco in a couple of weeks' time. So, I'll see you then.